All right, ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to discuss some ancient Egyptian mythology, whatever you want to call it. I prefer to call it astrotheology. Excuse me. And how it correlates to many other mythologies or forms of astrotheology, religions, the text, whatever you want to refer to them as. But I just like to draw some parallels for you guys that I've come across. And a little disclaimer before we get started: this is partially in my own interpretation, so I could be incorrect. I could be spot on. I don't know. I've run it by some people. No one's refuted what I have to say yet, but this again, this is interpretation. If somebody's able to find something to prove me wrong, great. But I'd like to get started with that being said. So I'd like to talk about the three aspects of the sun in ancient Egyptian culture that I know of, which is Horus, Amun-Ra, Osiris. Okay, Horus representing the rising sun, Amun-Ra representing the sun at midday sun, the highest point, the ram, the most high, and Osiris is the setting sun. And then comes to El, which is Set or Seth, which is Saturn, Aya, which is Jah, which is the moon, and then Isis, which is one of the names for Venus in ancient Egypt. The tricky part with that is Isis is also a name for the moon in some interpretations. So, take it for what you want. This is what I've discovered by doing my own research and then drawing parallels myself. So with that being said, let us get started. So, if you were to put these six planetary bodies, so to speak, these astrological bodies in a star, you could actually make the Star of David. Now, the reason why I'd like to go over this is because of the cycle of things. So you've got Amun-Ra up here at the top, transitioning down to Osiris. Osiris is, it starts right here after the midday sun and goes down, right? Well, Osiris is put to grass, laid to rest, killed, so to speak, by Set, who is Seth, which is really Saturn, who is El, okay? Then transitions into Aya, which is the moon. One of the names is Isis, so it could also transpose to the pentagram, and I can show you that in just a moment. But Aya is also Jah, and we'll get into that here in a second. So that transitions into Isis, which is Venus, which comes right before Horus, the rising sun, which comes before Amun-Ra. Horus is the sun from sunrise up to midday sun. Okay, this stuff is important because, well, many reasons. So let's look at Isis, Amun-Ra, and El, which is Saturn. So if you take that IS from Isis, bring it up to the point of this triangle, you get Ra, and then El. Now that makes Israel. Find that kind of weird. And in the same breath, you take the HO from Horus, bring it over to the OS of Osiris, which is kind of weird because Iris, we'll get into that another time. And then in the same triangle, bring it down to Aya, or Jah, which is the moon. So we've got the rising sun, the setting sun, and the moon. Now that we get the name Hosea, which is actually typically pronounced or spelled with a J if I remember correctly, but it's also another biblical name. Now you also, through the two feminine bodies, Venus and the moon, you get the name Isaiah. Well, through Saturn, El, and Aya, or Jah, you could also, through very small stretch of the imagination, get the name Elijah. Okay, now someone can argue with whatever they want. I don't really care. Set killing Osiris is basically where we get sunset. Okay, because the sun is setting. The sun is being killed by Seth, which is Saturn. And this also transposes to alchemy because the sun is light. Okay, and Saturn's metal is lead, and lead blocks out light, radioactive material, whether it's alpha, beta, or gamma radiation, even X-rays. It blocks out radiation, and radiation exists in many forms, one of them being electromagnetic radiation, which basically involves the visible spectrum plus UV and infrared. So I just wanted to discuss that real quick, the significance of that. So I'd also like to draw a couple other parallels for everyone real quick. So I would like to draw this parallel for everyone as well. Sorry, had to pause the video for a second. So in astrotheology and even in the Bible, we go over Venus. Okay, so in the previous video, Venus was described as Lucifer. Well, Venus is the brightest star in the pre-dawn sky. It announces the arrival of the sun, the rising sun, and then competes with it directly to be the most high. But due to its path, it doesn't take the throne and sinks back below the horizon, not emerging again until a time later in the year, approximately 6 months later, around September, where it emerges as Vesper, Lord of the Night. Okay, so it goes from the morning star to the evening star. Okay, the poles reverse, so to speak. Everyone says that the poles reverse. I've discussed that before, between the duality of Saint Michael and Samael, which is just Lucifer. It's Freya and Frigg, whatever you want to call it. But so Venus is Lucifer, okay? Venus is Lucifer, who is John the Baptist. Now, I've drawn that parallel before, but I'd like to draw it again just for anybody who may not have watched my video on John the Baphomet, okay? Or the Baphomet, whatever you want to call him. Doesn't matter. Same freaking story. Okay, so John the Baptist paves the way or announces the arrival of someone greater than he. Okay? Baptizes in water, blah, blah, blah. We all know the story. Well, hopefully we all know the story. Otherwise, why are we learning about this? Anyways, so John the Baptist announces the arrival of Jesus, who is the truth. The truth is the knowledge of good and evil, and Lucifer brings the knowledge of good and evil. So there's that parallel drawn for everybody. So anyone who didn't see that video can, begin to comprehend and do their own research on the correlations between John the Baptist, Lucifer, Venus, and also Muhammad. Okay? If anyone is confused by what I'm speaking of, go back, watch my video on, John the Baptist, John the Baphomet, the Baphomet, because the name that the Romans used in the document, the Romanus Pontifex of 1455, this is how they referred to Muhammad as Mahomet, which is Muhammad. Okay, not too far of a stretch of the imagination to go from Mahomet to Baphomet. Not too far of a stretch of the imagination. Okay, but also that could serve to paint the picture of the same being a duality. And if anyone's ever watched the show Lucifer, I mean, it shows it in there, spoiler alert, you can watch it in seasons 5 and 6. It's pretty easy to comprehend if you have this basic knowledge what the fuck they're talking about. anyone who cannot see the parallel, like, I don't want to bag on you guys, really. I mean, I've only discovered this knowledge within the previous, 6 months. So, if you know anybody who wants to try and discuss that with you, great. Just try and do it with grace and try and do it with a bit more finesse than I have. Trust me, talking about this stuff causes problems. Talking about it causes problems in and of itself, regardless of how your delivery is. So you have to make sure that your delivery is on point. I've made that mistake over and over and over, and I'm still learning. Okay, so now I would like to just do a quick little diagram of the upright pentagram, which is really the pentacle. Okay, and same kind of thing. Put Ra at the top, Osiris to the right, except instead of the moon and Venus being a separate entity, okay, we're going to put them together. This is based on Freemasonic teachings. I mean, people can refute what I have to say. I don't really care. Unless they can bring actual evidence. If they can bring actual evidence, great. But if they're just going to tell me I'm wrong, not much listening to be done here on my part. At least provide me, a thread to unravel for me to pull apart so I can actually take a look at things instead of just like, oh, you're wrong. If you have anybody who tries to argue like that, or debate like that, just don't listen to them. Trust me, all this stuff that I'm teaching, I speak from experience, and because I speak from experience, I know. Okay, I know that this is how it needs to be done. You can't really try and argue with people who just try and say that you're wrong without providing any sort of scientific or historical account or anything like that. Which some people might bring forth some evidence that might suggest that you're not on the right track. That's okay. It's okay to be wrong. Anyways, let's get to it. So remember that Isis is a name for Venus, but it is also a name for the moon. So, same thing with the pentacle, the upright pentagram. You've got Amun-Ra up at the top, Osiris, El, Isis, and Horus. Some pictures, again, paint Horus as John the Baptist and Osiris as Jesus being, taken out by Satan, so to speak. Because El is Seth, Saturn, or, Satan. It's really not too far of a stretch, really. But anyways, Israel. Okay, there we are again. But also, what I'd like to drive home is, just like in my video on John the Baphomet, okay, the left hand of God is not inherently evil. It is not just naturally evil, okay? It has been perverted by, the Church of Satan and all these so-called Satanists who want to act like they're actually worshiping Satan when really that's not even what it's about, okay? So the actual pentagram, the inverted pentagram, so to speak, some people might argue, oh, the spirit's down here, blah, blah, blah. Just don't even listen to that fucking nonsense, okay? The way that the Church of Satan composes it as, the horns of the goat, thrown upward in defiance, or something along that line. I can't remember the whole explanation, but this down here represents the Trinity denied. Now, what Trinity are we talking about? We're not talking about the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's not what they understand, and they know that it didn't happen. Okay? This is something that has been hidden from you. It is occult knowledge. Remember, occult means hidden. Okay? So, it's talking about the mind, body, and spirit. Okay? So I guess spirit could be down here at the apex, whatever, but it's really not what people think it is. Okay, it's like we all see pictures of the goat head and all that shit. The Baphomet. This is the Baphomet. On one side it says Solve. On one side it says coagula. Dissolve and coagulate, the two polarities of the Baphomet, or John the Baphomet. Or Venus, which is Venus and Vesper, Freya Frigg. Mahomet, Baphomet. It's talking about the duality. Okay. But here's the interesting thing. When you put them together, I know this is a shitty fucking example of the decagram, but you get the 10-pointed star. Okay, the 10-pointed star could very easily represent the 10 Sephirot of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Okay, and in another video, I'll be talking about the similarities between the Kabbalistic Tree of Life of the Kyballion and the Unbroken Tree of Life Yggdrasil of Norse mythology. If you want to call it mythology. Again, I call it astrotheology. I just use mythology to get people to really understand what it is I'm talking about. Okay? So in another video, we'll discuss that. Today, I'm going to end this video on that note. I would recommend that for further clarification, people do their own studies on ancient Egyptian cultures and belief systems. Read the Hermetica, read about their gods and their goddesses, read about the gods and goddesses of Greece and of Rome, because they're the same thing. And read about Norse mythology. I'm having to study more on Norse mythology to really drive home the parallels about like what these things are talking about. My understanding is pretty basic compared to some people out there. I just happen to be able to draw a couple parallels that gave me some good content. But I highly encourage anybody to start reading up on that. I'll put the description of another book where we can talk about the Sephirot of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, and we'll get to that in another video. Make the parallels between that and Yggdrasil of the Norse astrotheology. Excuse me. Sorry for my stutter. But anyways, for that, we're gonna have to wait. I'm calling it a day for today. At least for that. Maybe I'll stop and drop a little word of the day real quick. Either way, hope you guys enjoy the content. Stay safe out there. Some weird stuff's been happening. And if anybody wants to try and get a hold of me, drop a comment. If not, that's cool. But anyways, take care, guys.